All right. So, well, my PowerPoint works. Okay, so we're going to start off with introductions. I personally love introductions, and we're going to do a little fun fact too, because I love fun facts. But first, I figured to introduce myself. My name is Christina Hart. I'm a third-year doctoral candidate here at Roberts Wesleyan College in the doc program for school and clinical psychology. Right now, I am a school psychology intern at Newfane High School, so I'm actually actively doing some of these assessments that we're going to be talking about. And my fun fact, I have two little cute Pomeranians, and their names are Hen and Ben, and I love them. So, as you can see, the little dog right here, I was hoping it was going to be a Pomeranian, but they didn't have one, so we just got whatever dog that is. So, now, who are you guys, okay? So, I want everyone to go around. I want them to say their name, a fun fact about themselves, and don't say, I don't have a fun fact. Everyone has a fun fact, okay? What are you most passionate about? What experience do you have? And how do you personally assess reading, okay? So, why don't we start over here? Whoever wants to go.
Go for it. My name is Carly. Fun fact. So everyone in this room, basically, besides you guys, knows I'm getting married, but we have finished up more of our to-do list, which is a fun part of the fact. I am passionate about giving children their voices. I work in special ed, and they don't have a lot of advocates, I feel like. Experience, I went here, and I've been teaching 4 months after we graduated at the same school. So, and then how do I assess reading? I do F&Ps with my kids quarterly.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I'm Danny. My fun fact is I have a 1-year-old niece, Adeline. She's the cutest thing ever. What am I passionate about? I'm really passionate about reading and like getting my kids to like read and like write about reading. We do that like every single day in the classroom. Experience, I also went here for my undergrad. And right now I work at Wheatland Chila as a long-term sub in special ed. And then how do I assess informal running records?
Very nice. Oh, fun fact, I also went here for undergrad, so if anybody else went here. I was like, some people look like kind of familiar. Okay.
I'm Brenna. Fun fact, I last year worked with infants at my kindergarten center. This year I'm working with pre-K, so it's a big difference. I'm also passionate about reading, and I'm trying to get my pre-Kers to read more books. I went to Nazareth for my undergrad, and I'm here now, so.
Robert.
The center I'm at, we don't really assess reading right now.
Where are you at right now?
Kindergarten learning centers.
All right.
I'm Ariel. I guess my fun fact would be I have a 2-year-old and it was not fun for me, but she came to this class with me for about 45 minutes once. Everybody else thought it was fun. I'm passionate about trying to do more structured play in my classroom to incorporate more like literacy materials in their learning centers. So my experience, I went here for undergrad and I teach pre-kindergarten at Livonia School, and we assess reading through the EARLA program.
Cool. Very cool.
My name's Mark. Fun fact, I just bought a car yesterday. So
What car did you get? What car did you get?
RAV4 2019.
Very nice.
So really been passionate about researching every aspect of the cars. As far as experience goes, like I'm a science teacher at the Villa Hope. I've been there for the past 3 years, and really when it comes to assessing reading, we kind of go with the Fontes and Pinnell system. And that's kind of what we do.
Hey.
My name is Victor. Fun fact, I have 3 kids. My oldest is 11, my youngest is 4. I'm passionate about the journey of the students, both academic and social. I like watching them grow. experience. I went here, I did the PTT program in traditional undergrad. I worked in the city school district for 5 years as a teacher assistant. Then another 2, one in 8th and 7th grade, where I did assess reading via Ames Web and some other programs that they had available. Now I work with freshmen and we don't really assess reading.
Okay.
I'm Gabrielle. Fun fact, I have 2 cats. So,
Oh.
but I
Animal.
like a dog. I'm passionate about, I guess, just teaching in general and also special education. My experience, I graduated from Houghton College, and then I came here, and now
Houghton.
So now I'm a one-to-one aide in a special ed classroom for BOCES in Holly right now. And so our classroom does Thompson Pinnell and some other things like specifically for special ed, but I don't assess reading.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Kristen. A fun fact is I have over 400 books for my future classroom library. Yeah, I like to garage sale. Something I'm passionate about, obviously, books. I love books. That's the main reason that I got into literacy, because I just love children's books and getting kids passionate about reading. My experience, I went here for my undergrad. I did my student teaching at Hilton, and now I'm a building sub at Hilton. And how do I assess? As a sub, I don't really assess, but I know my building does benchmark DRAs.
All right, you just walked in.
So I'm Joanne. A fun fact about me is I have a baby at home. I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Fun
What am I passionate about? I mean, educating young children.
Seems to be a common theme here.
My experience, I also did undergrad here and I student taught and graduated just last spring. So I'm back for my master's and currently I sub here and there, but mostly I'm just at home. So I don't currently really do any assessing.
Sounds good. We can't forget you.
Charity Kinkelar. Fun fact about me is I am a blue ribbon baker. I won lots of blue ribbons for pies and banana breads and stuff like that at the fair.
Sounds amazing.
I do make really good pies. I'm passionate about really childhood development. I really love like the different stages of development of children. I have 3 of my own, so I've loved watching them grow through their stages, and I love watching my students grow. My experience is I'm a recent graduate from Robert's Literacy Program here. I'm a teacher at Byron Burgeon Elementary. I teach 1st grade now. How do I assess reading is we lots of different ones, benchmarking, FMPs, which we do 2 times a year, once in the fall and then once in the February, March timeframe. But then throughout, lots of assessments, just running records. I do checklists. I do all kinds of just kind of quick checks, that sort of thing.
Love it, love it. All right. So I heard all of your names, and I'll be honest, I maybe know one of them. So I'm so sorry. All right. So if I start jumping around and I get really, really enthusiastic, I teach a curriculum for people with developmental disabilities. So sometimes I get really into it and start jumping around. So if you're like, why is she jumping? That's why. So because we all kind of have some idea of how to assess reading or have heard different ways we assess reading, what do you think are the pros and cons to assessments? Just in general, standardized assessments, any grading assessments that you've done, what do you think are some of those pros and cons?
Well, the pros, they can drive your instruction, so they let you know where your kids are.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what else?
The con could be test anxiety.
Yeah. I know, at least personally, I used to have a lot of test anxiety. So if you told me to sit down in front of someone and go through a test while they're staring at me, I'm probably going to freak out. So I'm not going to do as well as maybe my performance would be in a general education classroom or somewhere else. What else?
Sometimes we teach the test instead of really assessing the kids and driving a curriculum we enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I know we have a list over here. Anything else you guys can think of?
I think another con would be things that we think we're assessing, but maybe the assessment is not quite assessing what we want it to.
Okay. Sorry if you can't read my handwriting. Anything else?
Con could be the reactive.
Yeah, absolutely. I was assessing a kid today, and he was very, very hyperactive. He would not sit still in his seat, despite like anything I was trying. And then when we finally like calmed down and he was ready to start, like he refused to pick up his pencil. He refused to start writing. So it was very difficult. He did not want to do that. He was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do it. So it was very, very difficult. And am I getting an accurate representation of his reading abilities at all? No. Anything else you guys can think of?
They're time consuming, so you can lose like core time to teach the kids.
Yes, they are very time consuming. And we're going to talk about some of them where like it can take like 2.5, 3 hours to do some of them. That means like we're pulling kids out of classrooms multiple times. Wait, that was over here. Multiple times. And especially with that kid who refuses to pick up his pencil, like I'm gonna be pulling him out like frequently. And I try to pull him out of study hall and stuff that he's not missing, but still, like I'm still taking him out of classroom, which is difficult. All right, can you guys think of anything else? What about culture? Culture can be a con. Because a lot of these assessments right here, I'm going to talk about some of them that really aren't culturally like relatable. Because if you're coming from culture or English is your second language, you might not know some of these words or these terms. It doesn't mean there's necessarily a learning disability in reading. That just means they haven't been exposed to different words and they haven't had that exposure in their culture or at home or the instruction at home. So I think culture is definitely a big thing that unfortunately I think a lot of people do overlook, but it's a very, very important thing to keep in mind when we are assessing kids. Also, there's a couple other ones that I had down. It could be a bad test, which we'll talk about what a good test is and what a bad test is. And what if the kid's just having a really bad day? What if they woke up late, they're running around, they don't want to be there, they got a bad test grade, and they're all overwhelmed? Do you think you're going to get an accurate representation? No. So those are all things that like we try to keep in mind when we're using these assessments and stuff. And that's why we take in a ton of different things into consideration when we're writing reports and assessing and classifying kids and looking to see if there is a learning disability in reading. We take in a ton of different things into consideration. And then a lot of times too is like they give you numbers and it's hard to not just look at a kid as a number and they scored this out of this entire population. So it's hard to look at them as like an overall comprehensive student as opposed to just like a number on a bell curve, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. All right, can anybody else think of anything else before we move on? I like our pro-con list. Okay, so a few things before we jump right into the fun assessments that we do for school psychology is reliability, validity, and normative data. So have you guys heard of reliability, validity, stuff like that? I figured I was like, you guys probably have some sort of idea of all of that. So pretty much we just want to make sure the test that we have is a good test. Plain and simple. We want to make sure that the test is going to measure what it's said to measure and it's going to give you the same results if given again and again and again. So reliability. Just to go over it quickly, since you guys have heard of it, it's can we generalize it? Do similar tests give the same results? If we give it again and again, are they going to produce the same results? If I give a kid a reading test and they score like a 90 on it, let's suppose, and I give it to him again 3 weeks later and he scores a 30 on it. That's a little concerning. So we just want to make sure that if we give the test again and again, or like if I give the test and if you give the test, that they are yielding the same results, pretty much. Make sense? Okay. Next one, validity. So the first one is construct validity. So that is the extent to which the content of the test represents the domain that it's intended to be measured. Does the reading test measure reading? That's pretty much what that's getting at. We don't want a reading test measuring writing or math or something else, which I certainly hope that there's none out there that do that. But in general, we want a reading test that's going to measure reading and what we're aiming to look at. And of course, there's a ton of different components of reading, but in general, we want it to measure what we're looking at, what we're looking for. Criterion validity, that is the extent to which a test can predict performance on a relevant criterion. So, I want you guys to think like the GRE. Did everybody have to take the GRE here? No? Well, you guys know what the GRE SATs. So basically that's predicting a performance. When you take the GRE or the SAT, that's predicting how well you are going to do in the future in graduate studies, in college and stuff like that. Do I actually think it's good? No. But that's just an example of the type of criterion validity. Okay. Any questions? Make sense? Okay. Please raise your hand if something doesn't make sense, because I know I can ramble sometimes. And if you're like, whoa, what the heck is she saying? Please raise your hand, okay? All right. So this is just a little graph that represents what we look for in tests. So obviously, we don't want something that's reliable, not valid. It's all the way over here, not near the middle of not the target, the bullseye. So low validity, low reliability. It's kind of all over the place. We don't want that. Not reliable, not valid. We don't want that. But if we have something that's reliable and valid, we got the bullseye. That's what we're looking for. And we'll talk about numbers in a little bit too. So that's what we aim for. And these assessments that I'm going to show you are reliable and valid measures as well. So if you guys see any of these, like on a report, or like saw that one of your students got one of these assessments, you know, we're good. Okay, so we're also look at norms. So of course we want to make sure that it's normed on a representative sample, and it's very difficult sometimes because we try to get it representative of like the whole nation. So we want to make sure like the demographics are representative of what is in the United States. But of course, sometimes there's schools where there's high populations of a certain race. And we're not talking about intelligence tests here, but one of the intelligence tests, African Americans actually score lower on it than Caucasians and other races, which is very interesting. But so yeah, you want to make sure that it has a good representation of races in the norms, pretty much. So norm reference, comparing individual scores to the scores of the original sample. So what we do is when we look at scores, we are looking at this individual's performance compared to the whole range of norms that the test was originally created on. So what they do is they go out, they give the test to a ton of different people. They collect all the data. And then when we give the test to someone, we are comparing them to all of that data that they initially gathered. So criterion reference, measured against a fixed set of criteria or learning standards. So I like to think of this as like quizzes and tests. So when you're giving a quiz or a test, you're expecting them to learn and know the information taught in class. So that's kind of like the learning standards. Okay, so bell curve. Has everybody seen the bell curve before? I figured. I was like, you guys probably know the bell curve, right? So just very quickly, this is average right here, and between the one standard deviation on either side. A lot of our assessments use percentiles. I think every single one that I've ever used has percentiles. Most of them use T-scores, so they have that mean of 50, standard deviation of 10, and then not many use Z-scores. And some use Stanines. But generally, the ones on here, which it's actually not even on here, they use 100 as the mean and they use 15 for the standard deviation. That's what most of the assessments use. All right, so we have a ton of assessments, and guess what? I need a volunteer because we're going to do some examples for each of the tests. So I'm going to need a volunteer. Or I can pick one of you. All right, love it.
Do I have to get off?
No,
Okay.
you're good. So the first one is the Wyatt. Okay, I'm actually going to need to borrow a protocol because those ones are gone. And this one. Okay, so if you guys can look at this one, I apologize if you don't have one because the first year doc students are using a ton of the Wyatt protocols. And this is the response level too that goes with it. Okay, so there are a lot of subtests in here that assess for reading. A ton of them. There's a ton right here. Now I'm looking and I'm like, okay, like obviously early reading skills, reading comprehension, word reading, like yeah, that makes sense. Why do you guys think listening comprehension is on there? How do you think that can connect to reading?
Well, some people don't read as well, and that can impact their comprehension. So if they're listening to something, they may comprehend it better.
Absolutely. And also with listening comprehension and reading comprehension, there's a big piece of that, which is decoding. So initially, when you're younger, listening comprehension and reading kind of is like two separate things, but once you grow up and you're building those decoding skills, if you're struggling to decode information on the listening comprehension test, you're probably going to struggle on the reading comprehension test, decoding different words, and the word reading, reading complex words. So decoding is like that middle factor there, and if you have a decoding problem, you're probably going to see a lot of problems on all of these. So even though listening comprehension is, yeah, you're understanding auditory language and stuff presented to you orally, it still has a part in the components used for reading, okay? So the Wyatt, some of the advantages, it's heavily used and recognized. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Wechsler assessment test. Have you guys heard of those? So Wechsler, they have a ton of assessments pretty much, and they are all very reliable and valid measures. So if you see a Wechsler assessment, then it's probably a good test. There's a lot of different areas covered on here. It does assess for reading, math, and writing. So at Newfane High School right now, where I'm at, we use this. And we just give the standard battery for learning disability or reevaluations, initial evaluations. We give this one. It's great and it gives you a lot of information. However, it does take a very long time to get. Especially if the kid is like doing kind of well academically, or if they're doing kind of well academically, it takes them a very long time to move through each one of the subtests. So it can take a long time. I know, like the one kid I'm working with is probably going to take like 3 hours to give. And for a kid who's very, I don't want to say oppositional, but like he's not really engaged and he doesn't want to do it, there's a lack of motivation, it's not going to be fun for him. It's not going to be engaging at all. However, it is easily, you can compare it to performance in other areas as well, which is great. It's a great test. There's a lot of different things on there that assess for reading, and I'm going to use you now, and I'm going to do an example of what we do. So, if we're looking at reading comprehension, which I'm not going to make you do that and read a passage, I'm going to have a question. But pretty much, we have this little easel that we use, and we tell them it's based upon grade level. So there's like a grade 1 area, grade 2 area, so we only give them passages that is based upon like what they should be reading at for their grade level. We have them read it, and then we have questions that we orally present to them, and they can either point to the answer in here, or they can verbalize it. However, once you get a little bit older, there's more abstract answers that you can't point to, so it becomes more of a verbal test and they can't point to it anymore. But that's kind of what the reading comprehension one is. The word reading one, there's a big long list, which should be in here. There's a list of words, and pretty much we just time them. We see how many words they got in 30 seconds, and we mark that, and then also we just go until they can't read anymore, pretty much. And then there's a pseudo word decoding, which are words that are not actually words, but we have them say them as if they are words. Yes. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to give you. Oh boy. All right. I can do this one. It's simple, okay? I'm not going to be like, I promise. I promise it's simple, okay? All right. So I would set this easel up in front of her, and then I say, point to the one that's empty. You did it. All right, point to the jar. Awesome. Point to the pear. Great job. Okay, she did it. But of course, it gets a little bit more difficult, obviously, based upon their age and stuff. But that kind of gives you an idea of what it is. And my whole thing went away. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on the Wyatt? So it's a great tool to use. School psychologists use it. It's widely accepted. But like I said, the only thing that sucks is it's not very engaging and it can take a long time to administer. So, all right. So the next one is the Woodcock-Johnson. Have you guys heard of the Woodcock-Johnson? Yes. This one's also very, very widely accepted. This one's personally my favorite because you only have to give 6 subtests, and in the world of school psychology, 6 subtests we want to jump up and down for because that's amazing. Normally it's like 10, 12, 15 subtests. So this also assesses reading, math, and writing. So if you open it up, the first one assesses reading, and then the fourth one also assesses reading. So we typically give the first 6, so it's 2 math, 2 writing, 2 reading. However, if there is a specific problem that we are trying to look at, or if they perform very low on one of the reading tests and we're like, okay, we really want to see what's going on, they have a total of 20 subtests in here, which is awesome. So you can pick and choose which ones you want to give past the first 6 that can help dive in to see more of what may be going on with the kid. And so like it's great for a diagnostic guide. It helps really look at their strengths and weaknesses and helps really inform treatment. It's a great test. Like I said, it's personally my favorite. It is timely and it's easy. We can get this done in 1 period. I could pull a kid down, get it done in 1 period, which I love because like I said, I don't like having to pull them out of classes all the time. And especially towards the end of the year when everything gets crazy in the school psychology world with reevaluations, and we start pulling them out of actual core classes. I hate doing that. But so this also does have 3 different forms. There's an A form, a B form, and a C form. As you can see on the top, it has the B form here, and it also has it on this little easel. There's 3 different ones, so you can give the kid the A form once, and if you're like, okay, like a little bit later you want to assess how they're doing again, you give them this B form or the C form, so they don't get too familiar with the test, which is awesome. So we can keep assessing them and seeing maybe how interventions are working, or just assessing how their reading is going over time as well. And a wide age range. If you're 90 years old, I can give this to you. There's norms for it. So no, it doesn't really help for in school, but you know, it's great that there is a wide range of norms for this. Or if you work with infants, one of you said right? Look at that. So A school psychologist or a psychologist in general can give this to an infant, which is great, so it can provide some information on that. The disadvantages, it can be time consuming depending on the kid. Honestly, I really haven't seen that much of an issue, but I guess if the kid does keep going through, it could take a longer time. Yeah, so honestly, like, I think the vocab jar is great. Okay, so I'm gonna give you another one. Oh boy.
I like the nightly.
Any questions so far on the WJ? No? Awesome. Okay, which one should I give you? I'm gonna say that every single time. Okay. So, this is the letter T. Find the T down here. Point to the letter S. Here are some letters. I want you to point to the letter I say. Point to the letter B. Point to the letter C. And if you'll notice, I don't give her praise, which you're not supposed to give praise when we give this, because that's great when they get it right, but when they don't get it right and they may not know yet, they can decrease their motivation, they can get down on themselves, because it's kind of awkward too. It's like, oh, never mind, we're just going to keep going. So we just don't give praise. All right, here are some letters. I want you to point to the letter I say. Point to I. Point to R. Great job. Even though at the end when they're done, I'm like, you did an awesome job, because that doesn't tell them if they got any answers right or wrong, but they gave it their all. They gave it their effort. I think it's okay to say at the end, you did awesome. Good job. All right. So that's the WJ. The next one is the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. So that is this kind of protocol. And I feel like by the title, you probably have some idea of what it assesses, vocabulary. So it looks at receptive vocabulary of children and adults. There is a very strong relationship between vocabulary and reading comprehension. Why do you guys think that?
More words you understand, the more you understand.
All right. Exactly, right? You can't understand a passage if you don't know what the words mean. So the more vocabulary that you have, the more receptive vocabulary, the better reading comprehension skills that you're going to have. So for this one is super, super easy to give. It does not take long whatsoever. There's no talking needed, so this is great. If you have an individual who is English as a second language, or an individual with disability, maybe a nonverbal kid, this is great because all they have to do is point to the picture. It can help inform interventions. The only thing is, with this, it's not culturally sound, because words are different in different languages. If it's a second language, the kid may not know the word. That doesn't mean that they have a problem with vocabulary. And also, like I said, to different cultures, they may not be exposed to these things. Doesn't mean they have a learning disability. It just means that they didn't get exposure. So with this one, you got to be particularly culturally aware. If you ever see it, or if it's on a report that you were looking at, or if the kid that you were working with received it, that is one thing to keep in mind. And also, this is just one aspect of language development and reading. It's important, but it's only one thing, so it doesn't really assess the entire broad range of reading. So, but it's a very nice test. It's very simple. It's lovely. All right. Now I'm going to give you more.
Can you give praise on this one? Or no?
No. So all of yours.
You weren't saying beforehand, so I was like, wrong.
So all of our, literally across the board, all of our assessments we don't give praise for. That's just kind of like a standard thing unless it's like some unique thing, but all of mine I don't give any praise for. Okay, so put your finger on the boy. Put your finger on the chair. All right. Put your finger on the picture that shows laughing. Put your finger on sleeping. And same with all of the assessments. It's based upon age, so you're not going to give a kid that's in like 9th grade like the very, very easy ones that like a kindergartner would know. So there's different starting levels based upon the kid's age or grade level. And you can compare them based upon grade level norms or age norms as well. All right, and then you look at ball. Dog. Spoon. Foot. All right, let's give you a more difficult one. Oh boy. I know, I was like, let's look at a difficult one because I feel like these easy ones.
Joanne, you want to do
Yeah,
it?
it gets the point, but all right.
Lots of reason through these.
I know, I was like, okay, we gotta give her a more difficult one here. All right, let me make sure I'm on the right one.
Pressure's on. Can I phone a friend? Like, it's too hard.
You can phone a
Oh
friend.
gosh.
Ooh, that looks like
So
This
this
is a
is
nappy. The worst subject.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Never really understood it.
I got math. I like math.
Well, we're talking about reading, not science. So
Yeah.
I know. Inhaling. Okay, inhaling. Oh, you got it. So it's a picture of the lungs. Okay. Hold on. See, and the problem is with these books too, it's like you got to figure out like which way to turn it based upon. Okay. Pigeon.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't tell if you were like faking it.
No, I
or
was like,
like,
wait a
debating for a minute.
Eagle.
What?
Okay. Flaming. Okay, let's see if we can do the hardest one.
That sounds like fun.
Okay, hold on.
No.
You're gonna
I
do
know what
awesome. It's
pigeon
okay.
I got nervous. Okay. Test anxiety is a real thing.
See, test anxiety. It's a real thing.
Yes. My defense.
Okay. See, and that requires me to say these big long words that we never actually get to. So. Okay, hold on. Okay. Dejected.
This one?
Yes, you are right. Okay. Any questions on that?
Yeah. It's dejected, like you get something that you're not supposed to get or something. You don't
I just mark yes and no and then make a score. So. Yes.
So you said that you can give these to 9th grade.
Yes.
Is it gen ed 9th grade students or is it the? Okay. How does that work?
So you can give it. So you can give it to gen ed students. You can give it to individuals in special education. So pretty much what we do is, if it's a gen ed student, and we go through and we get the score, they're just going to fall in the average range or higher on that standard deviation bell curve. So when you're looking at the norms of the entire U.S. population, they're just going to fall somewhere in the middle range. If you give an individual with special education, chances are they're going to fall a little bit lower on that bell curve. So it really just, it depends on where they fall on there. But.
So can they just come to your office and test it, or do you
Oh,
have to
no.
recommend it?
So what they typically do is, which I mean, I guess if they really want to be tested, I could pull it out and they could test, I can test them. But typically what we do is we get a referral for special education services, which can come from the teacher, it can come from the parent, or it can come from myself if I think that they need to be tested. Initially, they come down and we do a whole comprehensive evaluation that consists of intellectual assessments and an achievement assessment like the WJ or the Wyatt that we just talked about. We usually give one of those two. If there's a specific problem, then we may give the vocabulary test or one of these other tests that I'm going to talk about to get more of an in-depth picture of it. And then every 3 years there's reevaluations, and we pretty much do the whole process over again. We give them an IQ test, we give them an achievement test, and then we make sure that they get classified again so they can continue getting services pretty much.
So if a student is referred in 9th grade, and you guys retest every 3 years, would his standing move on to college possibly, or does it stop after senior year?
So if they are referred in 9th grade, they're going to do that initial evaluation right in 9th grade. They're going to be evaluated again their senior year. So we would evaluate them one more time before maybe they go on to college or something like that. Once they go to college, they are no longer covered under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, which is what we use to classify individuals. There's 10 different classifications, and pretty much we have to pick a classification in order to get them services that they need. After they graduate, they can get a 504 plan. They are covered under the 504 plan, and they can receive similar services in college. So if they get extended time on tests, like they can get them more extended time on tests as well in college. It just will be covered under a different act, pretty much. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions?
I was just about
Yeah.
to that. I was wondering about, I always thought it was like until age of 21. Am I thinking of something different? It's that you're still like under idea that it's up until the age of 21?
There is, part of it is something with 21, because if you stay in high school until 21, you can technically be in high school until 21 years old. You can still get services through IDEA, but I think once you graduate and you are no longer receiving services through like a high school or public state facility and you go to college, then you have to be covered under 504. I believe it's like that. But yeah, there is something where it's like 21. Yeah.
You can be in a transition program. So like BOCES 1 or BOCES 2, you'll still get reevaluated if you're in a transition program.
Okay.
That's where like IDEA or IDEA comes in.
Okay.
So like in our school, it's like you can stay at Creekside until you're in a transition program, and you still have to go through the whole reeval process because you can still get reclassified.
Okay.
Yeah. With all those fun laws and everything, like trying to figure out how do we just get them services, pretty much. I know there's some kids right now that I'm working with who are like 20, 21, and like they're still covered under IDEA. They have developmental disabilities, and they're just staying in high school. They're going to BOCES, trying to get some skills, which is awesome that we do that. But yeah, they're still covered under IDEA, and I think I'm testing one of them pretty soon. So. Yes. Any more questions about like what a school psychologist does? Because I can answer some of those questions as well. Yeah.
So when we reclassify kids pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year I had a kid that went reclassified as like emotionally disturbed, and then she went to other health impairment.
Okay.
So when we reclassify like that, I know they do like, my school does like the Whitcock-Johnson. What else would you necessarily like use to like classify the behaviors, I guess? When like I think of ED to OHI, that's more of a behavior than
Absolutely. If there are behavioral concerns, we usually give a BASC. That's the most common one that we give. The BASC is a behavior assessment something for children. And there's a teacher rating scale, there's a parent rating scale, and if the kid is old enough, I believe it's like 13, they can do a self-report as well. And collectively, all of that together helps determine like the behaviors that are in the classroom, behaviors that are at home, and we really take all of that into consideration when we're looking at the child's behavior. Also, we do a lot of teacher like informal interviews. We'll do a classroom observation to see what we're seeing as well, and we'll talk to the parent on the phone or in person if needed. Behaviorally, if you move towards adaptive behavior, which is more of being able to carry out day-to-day tasks independently, a lot of individuals with intellectual disabilities struggle with adaptive behavior. There's a Vineland and an ABAS that specifically assess for how many skills do they have. Can they count money? Can they tie their shoes? Do they have manners? Like typical like day-to-day tasks and stuff like that. But that can be kind of seen like in another avenue of behavior. But the BASC is usually the one that we use. That's like our go-to. Any other questions? School psychology. All right, if any of them pop up, I'm here to answer them, obviously. Oh, one other thing. I know for how many people are in elementary school right now? I know there's response to intervention that you guys use a lot of. And typically, I was only in elementary school a little bit, but I do know a little bit about RTI. From the school psychology standpoint, we have input on like the interventions that are used for RTI, and as they move through the tiers, if it gets to the point where they're not responding to the intervention and they're not catching up with their peers, then that's when we move towards special education classrooms. So typically RTI is done first, seeing if they're going to respond and catch up, and if they don't, that's when we move to special education, because we think there is something there underlying the problems that they're having in school. But if they're referred in high school, typically there's no RTI or anything. We just do an initial evaluation on them. All right. Next one is the Gray oral reading test. So that is this one right here. It's also red too. It's just based upon there's two different forms, which is awesome because this is one of those tests where you can give Form A and then you can reassess later and give Form B so they don't become familiar with the test. Okay, so this one assesses oral reading, hence the title, oral reading. It looks at rate, accuracy, fluency, and comprehension, which is great because it doesn't just assess like one like specific area. There's 4 different things that it assesses on here. So if you're concerned with the kids' oral reading, this would be a perfect one for the school psychologist to give. So some of the advantages, it can help determine the degree of the problem and where specifically the problem is with oral reading. Like I said, it can be any one of these 4, it could be 2 of them, it could be all 4 of them, but this will help really narrow in and help inform interventions that specifically target that problem area within oral reading. Looks at strengths and weaknesses. You can monitor students' progress. Like I said, there's Form A, there's Form B. So you give this, a few months later, the school psychologist might give it again and see how they're responding to it, which I guess is a great way to just look at how well interventions are impacting them. You can just give it once, then give it again. It's kind of like a pre-post test. This actually has been used in research studying reading in school-age children, which is kind of cool, kind of fun fact. And it is very easy to administer as well. I love these easy to administer ones. Some disadvantages, pretty much these 2 just say that although there is Form A and Form B, if you give it again and again and again, the kid is going to start understanding the passages and start getting familiar with it. So the way they read it might be a little bit better than their actual ability to orally read, just based upon the fact that they are reading these passages again and again and again. So yes, it's great that there's 2 forms, but you don't want to, school psychologist shouldn't give it like a ton. So All right, are you ready? So they have like little passages like this that the kid just reads.
This one was really hard.
I know, I was like, should I give her a hard one? But I feel like the hard ones, like they're longer passages. I'm not going to make her read the longer passages. Okay, so why don't we do, what form is this?
Are these basically like fancy running records? Kind of
What's a running record?
a running record?
Yeah.
Oh, it's where you listen to a person read and you take notes as like on the piece that they're reading.
Oh, yeah. It's like a fancy one, exactly. Yes, we have like specific tests, and this is like my world. I don't know anything outside. All right, so I want you to read some stories out loud for me. I'll give you the book, and when I tell you to begin, start reading the story out loud. Read the story as carefully as you can and as quickly as you can. When you have finished, I will ask you some questions about what you have read. Go ahead.
The girl likes to ride her new bike. It is yellow with white stars. She can ride very fast, but she goes slowly when she sees a car. She stops at the red light. She goes when it turns green.
Okay, how do you think the girl feels in this story?
She feels happy because she likes to ride her new bike.
When does the girl go slowly?
When she sees a car.
Where is the girl?
On a road.
What color is the light at the end of the story?
Green.
How is the bike described in the story?
Yellow with white stars.
Very good.
Are they allowed to look back at the story?
Yeah, you can look back
okay,
at the story. Yeah, that's fine. So, pretty much that's what you do, and then it just gets harder and harder and harder. But like I said, based upon the age, you're only going to give them a couple of the stories.
Yeah, that one I was like, wait a second, it didn't say that.
So would you just keep like increasing them? Like if they got a certain score that you were looking for, then you would just do the next one, or?
Yeah, so with our assessments, they typically have discontinue rules. So once they get like a certain amount of questions wrong, you just stop. And that varies based upon the test. So like we're not just going to keep giving them like harder and harder ones if they're completely failing at it. So it usually does a good job at like benchmarking. Okay, this is at the child's capacity, so we're going to stop here. It's usually like 3 or 4 questions. And that's typically what it is. 4 to 5. And so it's not too much of a child as well. Okay. Any questions with this? Any questions pop up? I was being cautious. All right. So the next one is the comprehensive test of phonological processing. And we're going to go in a little bit more depth on this one, which I think is cool because we're kind of going to go through what we do to score it, how we talk about it and interpret it, which I think can be helpful to kind of see our perspective on how we go through and interpret a test like this. So, the comprehensive test of phonological processing, as you can probably guess, it talks about phonological processing. So, phonological processing is very important when it comes to both reading and writing, and we're going to talk about the specific ones in a second. The first one is phonological awareness, second one phonological memory, and the last one is rapid naming. And really over the last 40 years, psychologists and other educators have started to realize how important phonological processing really is to reading and writing, and putting more emphasis on this when looking at possibly learning disability or how the child is developing in their whole reading and writing abilities overall. So phonological processing is definitely important. So we're going to highlight it a little more in depth. Okay, so for this one, that is blue and it is red. So there's two different ones. It's just based upon age. So these ones are a little bit more complex for individuals aged 7 to 24. And then there's ones geared toward individuals 4 to 6. So we just got to make sure that we don't give them the wrong one, because that would be bad. Which I've definitely sat down and I'm like, yeah, this is not right. But there's a decent amount of different subtests here. And these are what we call core subtests. These are the ones that you give. It's like the standard battery we give every single time. Supplementary, these are ones that we can give if we want to know a little bit more. Or maybe we messed up on one of them, which we do mess up, so sometimes it's not valid. We can sub one of these in for one of these. So that's what the supplementary ones are for. And most of the tests that we have talked about do have supplementary ones. Like I talked about in the WJ, there's like 14 extra ones in the back. So most have supplementary. And we're going to go through a couple of them, and it's going to be fun.
Can we do 4 to 6?
No. Okay, so the first composite. So what composites are? You're going to look down here at the bottom. It says composite at the bottom. These pretty much are comprised of the subtests up here. So 2 or 3 of the subtests up here, the scores from these go together to make the composite. So the first composite is phonological awareness. And that's the individual's awareness of and access to sound structure in his or her language, such as syllables and individual see, this is one of those words I cannot pronounce. Phonemes?
Phonemes.
Yes. Yes. So that's basically what we're looking at with phonological awareness. And phonological awareness is really a hallmark indicator of a reading disability, so dyslexia and stuff like that, yes.
Do they have these for other languages then?
Some do, some do not, which is definitely a limitation with some of the assessments. Most of them, if they do, they're in Spanish. But some of them really don't have like a big long range of different, because when you're looking at making norms and making them reliable and valid measures based upon like doing all the research and stuff like that, when developing a test, it's very difficult to try to get at like the same. So like if you're measuring something in English, you want to make sure it's the same thing in a different language, and it's very difficult with like how things are translated sometimes, even though that's not an excuse. And I think that we should have more things that are available to other cultures in different languages, but it's definitely a process to get it there. But so why does phonological awareness matter? So those who have a good phonological awareness, so they can look and identify those different syllables and that other word that I can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try again. When they can identify those, they are better able to read in general. They're better able to read a whole sentence and better able to decode it and get through it. So phonological awareness really matters, being able to pick out those different things in the word. So we're going to go over this subtest. So this is the first subtest. So if you just flip the page, it's on the back. So I think I'm going to give you the ages 7 to 24. Okay. So it's this one right here on the back page. And it doesn't matter if you have the red one or the blue one. It should be in both of them. So once you just flip the page in the front. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so you can't look at the answers, okay? Okay, so we'll start out super easy, and then I'm probably going to give you a difficult one. Okay, so say toothbrush.
Toothbrush.
Now say toothbrush without saying tooth.
Brush.
Say cowgirl.
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 Now say cowgirl without saying girl.
Cow.
Say popcorn.
Popcorn.
Now say popcorn without saying corn.
Pop.
Alright.
Thanks. Tried really hard.
Alright. So say tan.
Tan.
Now say tan without saying t.
Ann.
Mm-hmm. Say faster.
Faster.
Now say faster without saying s.
Fatter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say planes.
Planes.
Now say planes without saying mm.
Plays.
Yes, good job. Say fixed.
Fixed.
Now say fixed without saying k.
Fist.
Yes, good job. That was the hardest one.
I was like,
I know. I was like, I don't think I could do that one.
I had to like spell it out in my head and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it.
Right? And I was like, where's the cut? It's fixed.
Oh, I don't know if I would have got that.
So do you see how this subtest really looks at like the specific syllables and like understanding that word that I can't pronounce in here? So, on some of them, but I don't think on this one. No, you don't have to on this one. So they technically could take as long as they want. So they could like play it out in their head if they wanted to and really like pick out like she did the letter sound. Yeah, no, that one's not timed. All right. Any questions with this one?
So when it says stop feedback, so like on page 2, it says stop feedback, and then up at the top says no feedback. So are you allowed to say like good job, or that's correct?
Yeah. No. So what that means with stop feedback is if they get it wrong, you correct them.
Oh.
So like if they say like on the second one, instead of saying cow, they said girl, and they like got it backwards, you would correct them and be like, no, it's like they usually have prompts in the thing that says, no, actually the correct answer is cow, and then you would move on to the next one. And you pretty much correct them until it says stop feedback or until they meet the discontinue rule. So ceiling up here at the top, ceiling, that's kind of like the discontinue rule without saying discontinue rule because they like to be fancy. So when it means stop after examining misses 3 items in a row. So that's when you stop. If they miss 3 items in a row, that's when you're done. So you're not going to torture them with fixed the last one.
I'm sorry.
I know, I was like, oh boy.
The pickle would have been harder.
Yeah, pickle would be hard.
What was the pickle one?
It was pixel and then get rid of the
So it becomes
pickle.
whoa.
What?
But I don't think I would have gotten that.
What?
That was hard too. Give me some credit.
This is hard.
That one was definitely hard. When I said it, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to get this one, so I'm glad I'm giving it.
I was trying not to think it. Try to not.
All right.
think of this one.
So, any questions? Okay. So the next composite, so when we look back at the first page, the next composite down, phonological memory. And just, and also another school psychology tip. These little letters right here are the abbreviations of the subtests. So like E, L, B, W, and S, M match the subtests that go into that composite. Does that make sense? So that's how we know which subtests go into which one and which ones to give if we're only maybe giving one of them or something like that. Okay, so phonological memory is your ability to code information phonologically for temporary storage and working in short-term memory, aka your phonological loop. Okay, so when you're memorizing a telephone number, do you ever go over it again and again and again in your brain? So it's like, okay, they said like 579 again and again and again. That's your phonological loop. So you're taking that information in and then you're rehearsing it again and again and again to try to remember it. I don't know how well mine is because I can never remember phone numbers. So, so that's basically what that is like in a day-to-day sense. Like Try to remember a phone number. So although technically simple sentences will not be affected, a deficit in this area will impair listening and reading comprehension of complex sentences. Why do you guys think that it will affect more complex sentences?
Because there's more pieces to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're going through a complex sentence, you're decoding that sentence. And if you are struggling to remember the first half of it and rehearse that first half of it, I mean, you're not consciously like going through it when you're reading, but that's what your phonological memory is doing. You're remembering that information in your temporary memory. And once you get to the end of that sentence, if you're not strong in your phonological memory, you're not going to remember the first half of that sentence. And that's going to affect your ability to comprehend reading. And that's when the kid goes over it again and again and again, trying to remember that sentence, but is really, really struggling to remember that complex sentence. So yeah, exactly. It's decoding that complex sentence. So, all right, so we have memory for digits. So that is subtest number 4. And it should be in both of the protocols as well. All right, so on this one, you will hear some numbers one after another. After you hear the numbers, I want you to say them in the same order that you heard them. Listen carefully because I can't repeat the numbers. Let's try a couple for practice. And some of them, there are CDs that come with them, like this one I'll say play CD. You can do that, or like you can just orally present it to them. When I was first learning subtests like these, I would like rattle off the numbers, and like the person I was practicing with would be like, whoa, like wait a second. So we just gotta make sure like we space it out and it's not like a ton of numbers rattling off at once. Okay. 5, 2.
5, 2.
7, 3.
7, 3.
9, 7, 1.
9, 7, 1.
6, 1, 5.
6, 1, 5.
Right. 9, 2, 4, 8, 3.
9, 2, 4, 8, 3.
3, 1, 9, 7, 4, 2, 6.
Oh God. 3, 1, 9, 2, 4, 7, 6.
Close. That was very close. Okay, you want to try the hardest one?
Not really. Sure.
4, 7, 5, 1, 8, 2, 3, 6, 9.
4, 7, 8, 1, 9.
That's all right. I would like to meet someone that could actually do some of the hardest ones. But see, if you were going through and like doing this in your head at the same time as she was, like you would be rehearsing those numbers again and again in your head. So that's really what this is getting at, and especially with those longer ones. I don't know. But all right, makes sense? Any questions, Kat?
What if the kid said 52 instead of 52?
You would correct them. You would say 5, 2. Yeah.
I thought about that.
Yeah.
Putting place value, and I was like, I don't think I can do that.
I've had a couple kids do that before. And if like they keep doing it, like honestly, I might not correct them if they say like 73, but if they do 971 and they're still trying to put it, I'll be like, okay, like separate the numbers. Yeah. All right. So the next one is rapid symbolic naming. So this one gets into the retrieval of phonological information from your long-term or permanent memory. So how do you think this affects reading? It's okay if you don't know. I have. So, pretty much what this looks like is they're struggling to pronounce letters. So, they're really struggling to remember specific sounds of words or what words sound like. So, this is the kid that's in class. It's like choppy when they're reading something because they have to decode every single word again and again and again, or decode the sentence again and again and again, and they're not remembering in their long term what that word means. So they may stutter, they may pause a long time. So they're really not remembering those little sounds, those words, how like the sentence flows together from previous like learning examples and stuff like that. Does that make sense? Okay. So all right, we have another one. So this is subtest number 7. Okay. And a lot of them have like little stimulus books, like I showed you. They have like little easels or stimulus books that come with it, which is cute. So what it is, it's like a list of numbers, and then I'm going to flip it, and she's going to go through them as fast as she can. Oh. So, what letters do you see on this page?
A, T, S, K, C, N.
So you will be saying the names of letters as fast as you can. So when I tell you to start, you will begin here, and then you're going to go through this row and then onto the next one before you go onto the next row. So you're going to finish it and then go on. Just name the letters in each row as fast as you can until you come to the end. Try not to skip any letters. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right. So, ready? Begin.
S, T, N, A, K, C, T, S, C, K, A, N, C, K, T, A, N, S, T, K, C, S, N, A, T, C, N, K, A, S, N, C, K, S, T, A.
Awesome job. All right. So, and that's pretty much the end of that subtask. Super simple, super easy.
Okay.
Maybe not for the person taking it, but to administer, super easy. And what we would do typically is like we would just like make a little mark. Sometimes I go through and just make little slashes when we're just going through something super quick. I'll just make a couple of slashes, and then after the whole testing session is done, I'll go back and then count up everything. But yeah, so that is that. Any questions with that? Okay. So reliability of this is 0.8 or higher for screening purposes. So if you give this test as a screener to see just how they're doing with their phonological processing, it's 0.8 or higher. For individual placement data, such as decision making for special education classification, specific interventions and stuff like that, it's 0.9 or higher. So those are pretty good. Those are pretty darn good numbers. We love 0.8, we love 0.9. I mean, we're good with like 0.7s too. But honestly, anything lower than that kind of gets a little concerning. And all of the subtests but one, the one has 0.77, which is okay. Exceed 0.80, and that's awesome for individual subtests. So if you are ever looking at them, and you see something that says like 0.8 or higher, that is great, and that's what we're looking for too in tests. So, and at the composite level, 0.85 or higher. So that's great. So the interpretation of it. So for this, they have age and grade equivalence, which means that when we look and we score them, we can norm it based upon their age, or we can look at it based upon their grade level, or we can do both and see like, okay, so what that means is if they are a 12-year-old and we give this, we can say they're performing at the level of an 8-year-old, suppose. Or if they are in second grade, we can say that they are performing at the first grade level. So that's kind of what that means. Percentile ranks. I'm sure you guys are familiar with percentiles. If they're in the 34th percentile, they are performing 34% above peers of similar age on that bell curve. Subtest scale scores. So scale scores are very, very common that we use for individual subtests. Scale scores typically have a mean of 10 and a standard deviation of 2. So from 8 to 12 are in the average range on the bell curve. And you can see the little scale score thing right here. We use that. And we put the little numbers in the nice little bubbles here. And then after that, we go through and we score the composite scores down at the bottom. And even though it looks complex, it's really not that complex, but you guys don't really need to know these specific steps of going through everything. And we look at the composite scores, and the composite scores are the big overall scores in those 3 broad areas that we looked at: the phonological awareness, phonological memory, and then the rapid naming. So these qualitative descriptors, which I love these, every single test that we have talked about here has these qualitative descriptors. Because it puts it in simple language. Like if I tell you the kid scored a 95, what the heck does that mean, right? If like we're just looking based upon normal grades, I'd be like, woo, they scored a 95. That is awesome. But 95 is average. So typically, like on the side right here, it says descriptive terms. That's where we would put in these qualitative descriptors. And we also put them in reports as well to kind of give some sort of idea on where they fall. And like they are different for every single test, and every single test has their own individual chart. All right, working memory. So this is the last thing we're going to talk about is working memory. Okay. So working memory. So an example of working memory. Toby's short-term working memory, or his ability to hold multiple pieces of information in his mind at one time, is in the average range when compared to peers of his age. So, working memory. So I'm going to ask you another question. What's 6 plus 4?
10,
Plus 5.
15.
You just use your working memory. So that's holding the information, taking the information in, and then manipulating it in your mind, and then being able to spit out like an answer like that. So math. Working memory is used in math a lot. And that's usually the most common one is for math, but it is used in reading as well. So when you're going through and reading a passage, you're using your working memory. It kind of goes back to that phonological processing a little bit too, because you're taking in that information, you're holding it, you're remembering it. Sometimes if you have questions that they give and they have to read a passage, they have that question in the back of their mind. So they're using that question and they're reading at the same time. So they're holding a lot of information up there and manipulating it. However, if there's a struggle with working memory, a kid's going to struggle with that. So what does it look like in a classroom? Struggling to write notes, listen to directions at the same time, struggling to listen to homework instructions, as well as doing other things such as packing a bag. I don't know, this is not my PowerPoint presentation. So basically doing multiple things at one time, taking a lot of information in. If the teacher's up here talking and you're writing notes, that might be an issue for them and they're going to completely miss what I'm saying up here. But they can come off as having a problem behavior, lazy, inattentive, or one step behind. I think it's so easy for all of us to sometimes jump to conclusions when we see a problem behavior. And I think it's always important to maybe look behind what might be going on as opposed to just a behavioral problem, because there could be a lot of things going on, especially with learning. And like I said, that one kid who refused to pick up the pencil today, he struggles. He struggles a lot. And I'm sure that he would rather sit there and get nothing right and not pick up the pencil than try and completely feel like he failed. So, there's underlying learning disabilities or underlying problems. So, but I think that we should always keep in mind that there may be other things going on than just a behavioral problem. And who measures this and how? School psychologists. We measure working memory. And speech pathologists. Our IQ test has a working memory section that we do assess working memory. And one of the subtests that we give is very similar to the number one I just gave you. They repeat the numbers forward, backwards, and then in sequential order. And then we give them a math test as well where they have to manipulate numbers in their brain. And that's how we assess for working memory using an IQ test. And that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So we did like some inquiry projects, and the cultural aspect was brought up about those assessments, and so we were curious, like how is that problem being addressed? Are there new tests being created? It seems like these are kind of assessments that we've heard of for lots of years. So do they update them, or what happens with those?
So a lot of times they do come out with new and updated versions. That's why this one has, like, the Wyatt is at the 3rd edition, and like the WJ is on its 4th edition. The WISC, which is an intelligence test, is on its 5th edition. So a lot of times they do come out with new and updated norms. So they are trying to address those. Do I think that's a limitation? Absolutely. Like I said, the intelligence test for African Americans, they sometimes are a whole standard deviation lower. Does that mean that they have like a problem cognitively? No, that doesn't. But that's a concern, and it's still a concern. But I do think they have made steps to update those norms, and most of these tests do have a pretty good nationally representative sample with a ton of different races that is representative of the population. So usually these bigger ones are better at it. Smaller tests, not so much. But I know a lot of them do come out with updated norms like every few years and stuff like that. So does that answer your question? Okay.
I was just curious, like,
Yeah.
in the business of like test making, like I can't even imagine like what you have to do to get it to market, you know, like.
Right? I mean, like, I think the intelligence test is like normed on like 3,000 like students, and like in each like norm category. So there's like 3,000 individuals from ages like 14 to 15. So it's like you have to go through and like make sure that your races in there are nationally represented, and then you have to make sure that there's like a wide range of like abilities at the same time. And I don't even know. I have no idea. This is why I don't make tests. I just give them. That's just crazy. But kudos to those people.
That's what we've said. We did Dibbles, and like just trying to figure out how to like do the scoring and all the math that you had to do, and I was like, I don't know, somebody figured out this number, so you have to multiply this, and then you're dividing it and add this to it, and it's crazy math just to figure it out. So it must be that, like, I was like, same thing, psychometric people did it, I don't know.
Right. I have no idea. And like a lot of these assessments have computerized scoring systems, which is wonderful, because some of them, like, they have charts in the back of the books that like have just like numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers. And like if we hand score it, we have to go through and find this specific age group and this specific category and this specific subtest just to get the specific scaled number based upon their raw score from the subtest. So it's definitely much longer, but those computerized systems are quite nice. So we just plug the numbers in and they give it to us. Don't know how they do it, but they do it. Yes. Any other questions?
So like your meetings, when you attend meetings, I know we often have our school psychologists come in as a representative of just one facet. Do you ever, are you any part of like RTI teams, or how does that piece fit into you?
I was a part of RTI when I did my elementary school placement, like almost 2 years ago, which is crazy. And what I did, I mean, I pretty much sat in on it, but I know the school psychologist was the head of the RTI, And she went through and she got input from the teachers and seeing how they're doing and responding to interventions. And then what she would do is she would collaborate on, you know, like, how well do we think this intervention is working? If it is, how can we add to this intervention? Maybe instead of learning 20 words, they're learning 30 words now or something like that, and building upon it and really collaborating with other people and learning different interventions. And then she typed up the document and stuff like that. But in the high school, they don't have any RTI, and I'm at the high school right now. For special education meetings, pretty much we just have the teacher, the parent, maybe another representative at the school there as well. Like the assistant principal sits in sometimes, or a special education teacher sits in sometimes. And we go over the results of the report and talk about the recommended classification and get input from the parents and the teacher and what they're seeing in the classroom and stuff like that. But I really like how it's a collaborative process, and I think it's important that we all understand everybody's each unique role in the school, because it really does all come together when, you know, providing interventions to the kid and teaching the kid and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Do you find it difficult to pull the kids when you don't necessarily have a rapport with them to give them the assessments? Like, I find that, like, at the beginning of the year, giving my kids assessments is way trickier than, like, January when I finally have those relationships.
Yeah. It's definitely difficult. I was testing one kid today who I previously, like, met a couple times, but for some reason he didn't want me to tell him his name because he was skipping class, and then I pulled him down and he was like, "You've got to be kidding me." And I was like, "I'm sorry." But, like, usually I try to talk with them a little bit in the beginning, and I try to be like my goofy self and make it more relaxed and everything, so it's not so strict and professional and all that. So it kind of eases their anxiety a little bit. But it's definitely difficult if you don't have a rapport. Usually by the end of the testing sessions, we have a pretty good relationship. So it's a little bit better, but usually the first time they're like sitting there and I'm like, "It's okay, like, it's really okay, you're not in trouble, it's okay." Yes, it's definitely difficult. Yeah.
Say you have a kid that, you know, walks out of the assessment. Is it going to throw off your results a ton if you have to keep bringing them maybe 3-4 times to finish the same test?
Yeah, I mean, technically these are supposed to be given in one testing session. I can probably count on my hand the number of times I've given it in one testing session, just based upon scheduling. Like, the bell rings, they have to go to their next class. The kid walks out, they don't want to be there. They're not motivated, they're having a bad day. Yeah, it skews results. That's one of the things we like to highlight in their report, because if they're getting up and walking out, that says something about maybe how they're conducting themselves in the classroom, and that's something else that we can bring up and maybe address as a behavioral concern, or maybe something that underlying is going on, maybe some anxiety, they can't handle it and they're feeling overwhelmed. So that's something, typically when things like that happen, we highlight them in reports. If I see like a big drastic change from one testing session to the other, it's probably not valid. And what we say is should be interpreted with caution. And we can't give it again because they're already familiar with it. If we really, really, really need something, there are other assessments. Like, instead of giving the WJ, I could give them the Wyatt and like start again. But usually we just note it. Honestly, I've never seen anything so drastic where it throws off the results that bad. But yeah.
So they're pretty scripted, and like thinking about like the spot, like how do you make sure like you're hitting like IEP accommodations for like the WJ, like for like the math portion? Like I think of a lot of my kids get like graphic organizers or just like different pieces. Do you still have to give those in these, or because they're standardized, it is what it is, and that's the data for it?
So that's another thing that I think is a discrepancy between the core curriculum that we're given and how we're taught to teach kids, and then what these tests are standardized on, because we have to give them based upon what they are, because that's how they are reliable, that's how they're valid. We read the script, Do I deviate from the script sometimes? So I'm not just like a robot to the kid? Yeah. But pretty much I give what I'm supposed to give. They are supposed to assess their reading level despite what we're teaching in class and the methods that we're teaching in class. Like, for example, a kid can test average on the WJ, but be failing the Common Core. And that sucks because that means they don't have a learning disability, which is great, but the method of instruction isn't working for them at the same time. So there could be a big discrepancy with how they're performing in class and then how they perform on the assessments, just because, yes, it's assessing the same subject areas, but it's a different method of how it's delivered and assessing a different method of how. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I feel like I'm being tripped up on my words. I hope that makes sense. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was fun.
We loved having you. Thank
This
you.
was so much fun. You're welcome.
It's so nice because we talk about these, but I don't have my hands on them, so we
Yeah.
just almost like it's almost in passing. Like, oh, and
Right.
then there's CTAP that does
Right.
phonological learning. I don't know anything about it, but that's another one.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And that's why, like I said, it's so important that we all understand like our different roles and stuff like that. And especially if you're getting a report, like teachers get the report sometimes. You want to know what the heck these tests are doing and like what they're assessing. And heck, if there's a red flag, if something that should not be on there, you should know that as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, well, we so appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. And I have munchkins as well that I brought. So, and I've been in class and I've sat there and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to eat whatever they bring. Please eat them, okay? I've been there and I'm like, no, I don't want to be that person. Eat them, please. You're welcome. You're welcome. Obviously, you guys can have the PowerPoint, but I do need all the protocols. They're a little pricey.